Hey everyone, Pt.2 here, and welcome to part 2 of drum sequencing with the micro modules by Synthetic Future and hardware. In the previous video we did some very basic stuff and a little bit slightly more advanced stuff. Today we're going to dive a little bit more towards the slightly more advanced side of things. Namely, we want to do something with variations, because variations are cool to make things a little bit more lively. And I want to talk a little bit about polymeters. I think I misspoke in the previous video and I said polyrhythms. Not quite at that stage yet. We are going to delve a little bit into polymeters. Now to start off, I've made this little basic patch. As you can see, it just has a little bit of time. A kick with a sequencer, a snare with a sequencer, a head with a Euclidean sequencer, and two heads. We'll get right into that. And then we have a mixer and this to be released little module, which is just a mute button. So when I unmute, you can hear. It's a nice little fun sequence. So, what is going on with these two hi-hats here, you might be wondering? Well, one of these hi-hats is not like the others. Yeah, Foo Fighter references. This is actually a open hi-hat, which is pretty cool. And what we want to do is we want to have a variation of open and closed hi-hat hits. And I think here it is handy to know how that works in an acoustic drum kit. So usually when you are playing an acoustic kit and you hit the hi-hat with the pedal down, you will get the closed hi-hat sound. When you lift your foot off the pedal, partially or completely, you will get the open hi-hat sound. Now if you switch from the open to the closed sound, you will cut off the decay of the open sound. Because you close the pedal, the two cymbals slam together, and then you get the click sound again. So that's kind of the effect we're going to replicate here. That sort of choke sound, as they call it, on the hi-hat. And for this we are going to need a few tools which are actually very new to the micro bundle. In the previous video we already showed off the muxer. Just to quickly recap, the multiplexer, several inputs, one output, and every time you send it a trigger, the chosen input will output. And just to visualize that, let me zap into the future and show you a little patch that does this.
The vehicle starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and all is still...
So here we go. We have the oscilloscope here, and we just have DC voltage going into the muxer. So it goes up in voltage with the dial going higher, and then at some point I ran out of space, so I made it jump down. Now right now we are at input 1, so we're at equilibrium. And once I press the trigger button, it will jump to output 2. So it becomes slightly higher. Another trigger pushes it up to 3. Then we are at 4, 5, 6. So now we jump down. 7, 8. And it jumps right back to 1. Now this is already a pretty powerful tool because you can switch inputs time dependent, but you're always locked into this fixed order where you always move from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and then back to 1. And for what we want to do, we actually want to have a little bit more control, and we actually want to be able to switch from 1 to 2 in this case. So you could still do it this way with a smart retriggering, but we can actually do it a little bit more clever. So for this we need actually a new module, which is the voltage controlled muxer. So let me get it in there, wire it up, and I will show you the difference here. So here we have the voltage controlled muxer. Setup looks kind of similar. We still have the 8 DCs going into the 8 inputs of the muxer. But as you can see, there's no longer a trigger input. We now have a CV input, which is connected to a DC source. Now you can set our muxer in two ways. It can either respond to voltage or to nodes. We're just going to use voltage for now. And what you will see is that once the voltage goes up, it will select a different input to output. So I can move this up. There we go. That's input 1, input 2, input 3, input 4, 5, 6. But we can also go down. And it's a nice little extra bonus thing. We can actually just type in something and it will go to that specific input. There we go. So that's pretty cool. That is a slew setting, so you can either slew to the other setting or you can just basically instantly jump there, which is pretty nice. Now, let's go back here. So that's 2, let's go to 4, and we can jump up and down. Now, the one thing to keep in mind here is that we're working with a 5-volt signal. So there's 5 volts divided into 8 outputs. So it's a little bit odd, but you know, it is what it is. This is what we're going to use to do our hi-hat choking thing. So now that you have a little bit of a basic idea of what this thing is doing, let's actually look at it controlling the hi-hat choke. So first off, let's get rid of all this stuff. Let's make a little bit of space. So we want one of these controlled multiplexers. Throw it in there. We want both of our hi-hats to go to the multiplexer. Hi-hat 1 goes here, hi-hat 2 goes here. And then we want the output to go to the mixer. Now, if we turn it on, it will still sound the same. But we can actually at least if it's triggered, switch between these two things. Now obviously switching things by hand is for absolute losers, so we're going to need a little bit of control here. So we're going to grab a CV sequencer, throw it into all the things. Now actually let's put it before the open hi-hat, so we have a little bit of a separation here. So we can see this is the sequencer for the close, this is the sequencer that determines the openness of the hi-hat. Now, 0 CV will be our 0 position, so let's 0 this entire thing out. There we go. Obviously, we want a retrigger button on this, as per usual, and we want a trigger. Now we're actually going to use the 8 trigger we already have here, because that's fun. Look at it go. Just zooming. And if we turn things on right now, oh, we actually need to connect this to the voltage muxer, of course. Absolutely nothing changes, as expected. However, if we change steps, now, doing it this way does have one downside, and that is that you get a little bit of async between the triggers happening on the hi-hat and the step sequence or the CV sequencer sequencing. So you get these pretty big volume differences. I think that's kind of cool. If that's not your jam, there's actually a very simple fix for this. Simply trigger CV with the same Euclidean sequencer. As you can hear, whenever there is a open step followed by a closed step, you get the tss from the open directly followed by the tss from the closed. So you get a nice little choke and tss, which is pretty cool. You can of course do this exact same thing with other instruments as well, because it's all CV, so it doesn't really matter. You can do whatever the hell you feel like. So one way to use this is to do variations in, for instance, a snare. We have this pretty hard snare. You can also make a much quieter snare and use that for ghost notes. So instead of every snare going tack, you can also go tack, tack, and have kind of that more rhythmic swinging snare sound, if that's your thing. You can also do it with kicks, basically anything. And that's a nice thing of Voltage Modular. You can just mess around and see what happens. So that's using VMux to get some variations going. And I will show a patch a little bit later on where I also have it on the snare, so you can get a little bit of context there. But that's all I wanted to show with this specific patch. There's more we can actually do with VMX, and that's where we're going to move to right now, before we move into... I don't think we actually have time for odd meters. No, we're just going to stick to VMX today. So let's get a clean slate and let's get a little sequencing going, because that's fun. Alrighty, there we go. So we've basically reset to the default patch with our time, kick, snare, head, and mixer. But as you can see, we've added some VMXs on every instrument part, and we are adding some sequencers to every part. Why is this, you might be wondering? Well, we are actually going to do a little bit of song structure practice, is basically what it is. We're not going to structure out a full song because I'm basically too lazy to do it, but I just want to show you that there's the option to do this. Let's actually get all the little lovely re-triggers going, and let's actually get all the triggers going as well while we're on it. There we go. These are quarter notes, and these are quarter notes as well. Cool. Get everything back in sync, and we're off. So, what are we going to do? Good question. Glad you asked. We are going to do a sort of song structure thing. And for a song structure thing, we need a little bit of a ID. So one idea we can do is we can actually start a song structure just with a bass drum, then add the hi-hat, a hi-hat variation, and add the snare. Something like that. That's probably a good place to start. So the bass drum actually is fairly boring. We're just going to keep it as it is. For the snare, what we're going to do is we're going to connect all these as well. And we're actually going to move them down 1. And then we need the hi-hats. And we'll have the out 1 going into 2. Let's actually get this one in there, and let's get this one in there. Cool. Now we can hook up our TCSs. All right. So the way this is going to play out is with this set to 0, this sequencer will play. Nothing will play here because there's nothing connected. And nothing will play here because there's nothing connected. So let's see if that works out. Oh, what do you know? It works. And if we move up the DCS to 0.7, we actually don't get a snare because I forgot to connect it. All right. Now we can actually move it up again. So let's move it to the second position, which is about 1.4. Let's add a kick there. That's actually this lane. should be this snare lane. And this way we can actually structure out songs. Now we lose the kick because we're in a lane where there's no kick anymore. The nice thing here is you can actually use one of these CV sequencers for this as well, to automatically move through this. And I think this is a very powerful tool to get variations going. So we can have our kick intro, and once we're getting into the groove, just move it up. Until eventually you hit a number where there's nothing connected. So here you can see just how useful VMX is, because you can also move it up and down in whichever order you need. And if you're feeling particularly creative, you can actually just hang an LFO to it and go absolutely nuts and have it just cycle through all the sequencers all the time. So I think that's actually a good point to end this video, but not after I show you the slightly bigger patch I promised. So let me just save this and let's get there. And this is a slightly bigger patch. As you can see, we now have a step sequencer on these snares. So we actually get several snare sounds. Let me see if I can isolate that. And we get several hi-hat sounds. With that choking behavior. And that adds quite a bit of movement to the entire thing. And obviously then you can start adding all sorts of random stuff to it. And one thing I did here is use a step sequencer controlling DVMX to actually cut some of the notes out. So it's switching between an actually connected VMX port and an empty port. So whenever it hits the empty port, the sounds get cut off. So that's pretty fun. So there's a little trick you can play around with. I think VMX is one of those things, multiplexers in general, that just that single module, I think, makes it worth looking into this entire bundle, or at least the sequencing bundle, because it's extremely powerful, extremely flexible. You can really, just do all sorts of stuff with it. It doesn't have to be triggers. You can also send notes through it and switch between notes. You can do all sorts of absolutely bonkers stuff with it. So that's the video for today. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, drop them down below. And if you have any suggestions for microbundle, any modules you're missing currently that you're interested into having included in the bundle, definitely leave them down below as well. And in the description, you will also find a link to get Micro for Voltage Modular. We're still at the intro price. We are actually going to make the price higher when all modules are included, just because it's getting a bit of a weird proportion right now. We have too much module for too little money, to be absolutely honest. So if you want to steal from us, grab Micro. Yeah, that's it. See ya.